Well, hello there, woman beings, and welcome back to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast. I am your host today, Kelly Ann. I am here with the stunning and beautiful Emma.
Hello.
And the ravishing,
Wow.
And I am forgetting what other beautiful, lovely word I had to describe you, the delightful Kelly.
Hello.
And we are here with the one, the only feminine embodiment coach, the creator of the Feminine Wholeness Method, and the seductress of soulfulness herself, Morgan Day Cecil. Welcome, Morgan.
I just got goosebumps. Thank you so much. And I love the word delightful. So
I
Yes.
do too. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
Yeah, delight's been a theme recently. So, and I am
Yeah.
delighted to be here with you all today. So, we're going to be talking about all things feminine embodiment and what it looks like to fully show up, and with truly a hero of mine. So, without further ado, we're just going to dive right in. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
without expectation or judgment.
We will hold a safe space and support each other.
As we navigate together in the form of feminine.
I've been following you for a long time. I think I found you about 9 years ago in my second year of ministry school when I felt so disconnected from my body. And I actually found you on YouTube, and you were doing like these beautiful yoga videos that I felt so grounded and so peaceful in. And it became a part of my daily practice for several years. I think actually I just kept watching the same ones after I think you stopped doing yoga videos. I'm like, I'm just going to replay those and keep meditating and keep doing those things. And it was amazing. So thank you for the work you do and everything you put out in the world. I'm super grateful for it. And with all that in mind, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do? Because it's a lot, like as a feminine wholeness coach, and how did you get into the work?
And every single time someone asks me this question, like, which little thread are we going to pull on this time? Because there's so many roads in, like any one of our lives, like there's so many threads to pull on. And it's amazing how the little things really turn into something big. So I guess going back, tracing it back to an early question, because I think the questions that we ask and sit with and contemplate really guide our lives. And so the question I was sitting with my whole life, even before I could articulate as a full-fledged question, was, what does it take to be free? And that question came from this desire and this feeling, this felt sense of so much life in me, like any child, right? So much life, and wanting to experience it and feeling excited to participate in the world, and then being met with this real contrast of shame or limitation or fear from the outside, and I think we can experience that through our families or the religion we grew up in or cultures or city. But that was a very strange experience for me, like on one hand feeling so free in my body and feeling so alive and excited to be here on this planet experiencing life, and the other hand being met with things that really confuse me, especially becoming a woman, especially that transition from child to woman. And my experience as a woman, young woman, includes sexual abuse, trauma, and so directly into the work that I'm doing now, that was the first healing work that I began for myself, was to reconcile these two very powerful forces in me, which were my sexuality and my spirituality, and to find my way back to home in my body. And I've always been someone that's just been so curious, and I love learning. And so getting my master's degree in philosophy and learning from both Western traditions and Eastern traditions, I was just hungry to learn. And whatever I was learning, I was excited to share. I never had the intention of becoming a coach or doing what I'm doing now, but it feels like the most natural outflow of this is my life, and this is the fruit of what I've lived. And I think it's really natural to share it, once we have something that feels like a gift, like we want to share it. So
yeah, and I love that you are so curious. That is so beautiful. I feel like I come to your page and like every few months you'll be like talking about something fresh, like,
yeah.
and I love that. I love that it feels like you're so active on your journey, and it feels like you got into this work through like self-advocacy is what it seems like, advocating for your own healing and wholeness. What was that process like of needing to step in and like do your own work?
Well, I became a mom, and that was really what kickstarted it, because I was someone who loved life so much. I could also use life as an escape, like traveling and boyfriends and being the chameleon that just could kind of just be excited and blend into whatever someone else was excited about. So I was constantly finding new aspects of myself in the relationships that I was in, and always traveling to new places. I couldn't sit still. For me, that was just so fun. I loved it. And I had an idea that I would continue doing that until I got married and then live abroad, maybe marry an Italian. I don't know. But then I got pregnant really out of the blue. It wasn't, I mean, I was someone that started having sex pretty early, like 16, and it never crossed my mind like pregnancy and sex went together. Like I was on birth control from the time I was 16. And so I had lots and lots of sex and never got pregnant. And then so at 26, when I found myself pregnant, it was so disorienting. Also because I wasn't in a relationship. It was more or less a one-night stand with an old flame. So, the way that life goes, like there's so many little interesting synchronicities and coincidences. And what it's taught me is that you never really know what's good luck or bad luck. Maybe you guys have heard that proverb. It's like a Chinese saying. It's like good luck, bad luck. It's hard to tell any given instance what is good luck, what is bad luck. For instance, like I wasn't planning on seeing this old flame, and it was Christmas Eve, and I just happened to be dropping by a Christmas card to his mom's house, and he was no longer living in the state, but he happened to be there. And we hadn't talked in months and months and months. So champagne and, one thing led to another. And, a few months later, I found out I was pregnant. And that at the time was bad luck. Wasn't planning on it at all. It was devastating. For me, that was one of the first real crisis of conscience and crisis of identity. I grew up in a family where my mom was a single mom, my sister was a single mom, and it was always put on me, do not become a single mom. So it was like a vow I took when I was really young that I would not be a single mom. And when I found out I was going to be a single mom, I was like, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
I got all the way through school, even got my master's degree, and here I am following in the footsteps of this, it felt like a curse from my mother's side. But now looking back, it's like the best luck ever, because my son initiated this journey that you're asking me about, and it's such a joy, like to be a mother, to be his mother. Like, I feel so blessed. So you never really know what is good luck, bad luck, what's good or bad in your life. Just keep writing it out. But yeah, that moment when I knew I was going to be a mother alone, I knew I needed to get serious to do my own work, because I literally had the thought, like, it was okay for me to go on and on doing what I was doing, but I did not want him to suffer the consequences. I was okay. I didn't value myself enough at that point. I didn't know how to honor myself, to really see myself as worthy of caring for, of healing, of going on that journey. But he was worthy. So I began that journey for him. So whatever bad choices I was making in my life, like he wouldn't have to suffer them.
Wow. Like, one, that speaks to your tenacity as a woman. So much respect. But also like the metamorphosis that really comes with motherhood, that I feel like as a culture, we like don't create that space, or we put like the space in a weird light. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, I guess I don't know what I'm trying to describe, but more like, it's like, oh, they're just a mom, or it's like, oh yeah, that's motherhood. But it's never like this praised opportunity of what feels like becoming more of who you are.
Yeah. And that's something that I think was just a grace, because I never felt like I was only a mom. I think sometimes I work with women, and my friends even included, they feel like that identity kind of absorbs them fully, and they collapse fully into that identity, and maybe by choice, or maybe just it feels so overwhelming, and they just find themselves that their only identity was mom. For me, like, I knew that I was given Luca and to be a steward for him, but he never felt like I never felt like I owned him. And I felt like I could come alongside him, and we got this opportunity to walk side by side through this life and help each other grow as souls. So yeah, I knew that motherhood was a part of my identity now, and what it became a true gift in my healing journey. But I was never just a mom in my eyes.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I feel like people often use motherhood as a way to neglect like healing, or to neglect like finding a more whole version of themselves, because, you know, the child then becomes first. So it's fascinating to hear that this was like a reverse for you.
Probably because I needed so much help. Probably because I don't know. Probably because, like, in order to be able to put him first, I needed to first like get myself back to a place of just like, I'm not such a hot mess, but I was very much a hot mess. And so maybe it's because I started so far behind on that journey that I just had this awareness that I needed to put myself first, just so I could care for him in a way that was truly honoring and not just masking or hiding or, you know, spiritually bypassing my own work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you got into this healing, I assume that led you towards like the coaching that you do now and the work that you do with other women. And I'm curious to hear like what your coaching work looks like, and like what it looks like to do what you do.
And I have this image right before I became a coach. I was on my mat, on my yoga mat, Kellyanne, and in prayer, and I was asking God to tell me who I am. And I really, really wanted a sense of purpose, and that was divine. I really asked for it. I really wanted a name. And I was like, I'm not getting up from this yoga mat until you give me this. And, you know, I was doing my yoga, doing my breath work, and listening to some good old fashioned evangelical Christian music. And it was,
lovely.
you know, very evocative and emotive. And I was crying in tears, and then there was silence. And all of a sudden there was this vision. And I saw a woman with this staff, and she just threw it into the ground, and it was like this vibration of love. And then she sang, just come. And she was calling people to come into this clearing circle. And I knew immediately that's what I was called to do, that I was just called to invite people into this clearing circle. My work is to push back the darkness, push back the noise, push back the shame, the fear, the guilt, so that people could have an encounter with the moment, God, their own wholeness. And I really did trust that was enough. So that's what I see at the core of my work still. And then, of course, it's built on that. Now I have tools that can help match those profound spiritual experiences of, you know, nothing short of awakening, really, when you come into that sense of self and sense of wholeness and sense of possibility. But yeah, so I don't know where you want to take from there. So that's kind of a deep, what I do is I really help women experience their own wholeness and then give them tools so they can access it again and again. And it becomes a skill that they build, and it becomes second nature to them, you know, first nature, right? Because we're already whole. We're whole. We've always been whole. We'll never not be whole. But so many of us lack a true feeling of our wholeness, a felt sense of wholeness, and this inner knowing of how to show up in the world from that place, this confidence of how to show up in the world from that place. And so in the skill sets that we build, there are three main categories. The first being embodied security and confidence, to help a woman really feel the security in herself, in her own body, the confidence of just being here. in her body. And that's like that foundation of safety we all need. If you're familiar with trauma work, and just like safety is square one before we can really start the deep growth and up leveling, or whatever you want to call it. Safety is square one, and that starts with the nervous system. And then the next skill set we build is emotional mastery. So that's working on our stories and all those stories, that the narration of our inner child, the wounds, and how we still replay those wounds in our intimate relationships and friendships and business relationships, and to help get out of that victim mindset into a place of true power that's truly honoring of the women that we desire to become. And then the third skill set we build is empowered imagination. Like to use your mind to be able to come home, not just to our body, but come home to the mental faculties as well. And so they're not stealing from you or beating you up or making things harder. But you get to open up to all the wonders of the imagination and use that in service to soul, instead of feeling like you're fighting this inner critic all the time. So those are the three main categories of work I do with women. It's very broad and expansive, and that's why I had to choose the term wholeness. Back 7 or 8 years ago when I was creating my business, I was like, what do I call this work? What do I call this work? And this was before wholeness was a term that you now see in magazine, taglines. But I just felt like there wasn't anything big enough. Wholeness, it needed to be called feminine wholeness, so I wanted to work with the whole of a woman, mind, body, spirit, head, heart, honeypot is what I call it. And so all of life belongs, and all the faculties of our wisdom centers is something I teach in the Feminine Wholeness Method. We have many ways back to our wholeness, many portals back to our wholeness. And the fun of being able to teach women all of these different ways they can enter in back into their presence, back into their wholeness. Like that's the work I do.
I love that idea of you are whole currently, always have been, always will be. You can't stop being whole, but our relation to our wholeness changes, and whether we feel in sync with that wholeness that we inherently are, that is irremovable, is what varies. I think that's just such an incredible shift in mindset compared to the way that a lot of people will tend to think in terms of, oh, I am bad, or I am broken. Instead it is, I am whole, but my, this current state that I'm in doesn't align with the wholeness that I am.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really incredible and really powerful, I think.
Most of my clients are brilliant, educated, well-therapied women. They've done their fair share of therapy. And so they come to me and just say, I know I'm whole. I listen to all the podcasts. I read all the books. I know I'm whole. I keep finding myself showing up in the world as if I wasn't. And I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I'm stuck. I don't know how to live from that wholeness. And so I teach them and guide them and give them the tools and all the things where they realize that this is who they are. This is what it feels like to be naturally, authentically themselves in the world.
Yeah, I appreciate that you already dove into those 3 pillars that you have of what you do and breaking it down. But I'm curious to hear just a little bit more about practically how you apply those things to someone's life, or practically how those things can show up when you're working with somebody.
So one practical piece is a woman may come to work with me because she was raised to believe her sexuality was bad. And she carries a lot of shame around her sexuality, her femininity, expressing that, delighting in it, embracing it. And she doesn't want to feel stuck anymore. She wants to feel free, to freely express who she is as a woman in the way that she dresses and how she engages in intimacy and relationship and romance and how she's seen in the world. But she just can't. She knows it, but she just can't. And so what we begin to start with is really simple practices of coming into relationship with the pelvic bowl. The pelvic bowl being a seat. This is our foundation of being. And once upon a time, people humans related to sense of self from their belly, from their deep bodies. This is kind of modern and new. We relate to our sense of self as the head.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think of, right? Everything comes from our head, and our language, and like the head of state, the head of an organization, the head of two heads are better than one. Like all these examples of, yeah, of course, like our brain is in our head, and this is where thinking happens, and this is who we are. And that's just not it. That's one pole of our being.
Yeah.
That's could be said the masculine pole of our being and consciousness. And so the first step is to come back into connection with the feminine pole of our being, a sense of self that abides in our body, deep in our pelvic bowl.
Yeah.
And begin to have a relationship there. And that can be as simple, as gentle and as simple as just acknowledging, however you want to, people call their vulva, pussy, like pelvic floor, but just acknowledging her, this part of you every morning, and begin this relationship. And then there's breathwork practices to breathe into the pelvic bowl. And then there's more healing practices where we can work through that stuckness, that shame, that, it could be yours, it could be your mom's, it could be who knows what, but you feel shut down and numb. You can't feel sexual pleasure, and you could be holding a lot of trauma there. So there's breathwork practices and vaginal de-armoring tools where we can start releasing that stuck and held energy so that you can come to rest. Coming to rest at your pelvic bowl is, I'm safe. When you rest somewhere, you're safe. And so very practical things that we need to do in order for that to happen.
Yeah, I love that. I have been on a journey with my pelvic bowl for, 3 years now, I feel like. But honestly, you can trace it back further, right? Growing up in purity culture, that can tend to do a number on you, and feeling shame around your woman's body. I feel like it tends to just simmer down and rest there. The process of reclaiming that and feeling empowered by that, and actually pussy power is a thing, and that's okay, and I'm gonna claim that, is so it's so a shift in how you show up in the world, and so much. The only way I feel like I can describe it is power.
Yeah. A lot of traditions orient a woman's power in her pelvic bowl, her cervix.
So good.
To orient from there and breathe from there and have your sense of awareness from there. It shifts everything. We become way more attuned to the information around us, and we're able to respond instead of react. We're able to be instead of perform. We come home to the present moment when we come home to our pelvic bowl, and then we can begin to align these energy centers, the three main head, heart, and honeypot. You talk about alignment. This is where we really get to experience our wholeness and our authenticity, when our honeypot, our heart, and our head are aligned. This is our wholeness, and then we can move from that place, all synced up.
Yeah, it's funny. Kelly and I were talking about a podcast I was listening to about the female hormone cycle. And this brilliant scientist is on it, and she's just talking about so many things that are far beyond my understanding. But she says that 80% of women are constipated, just in the Western world in general, just period. 80%.
80?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that really blows my mind.
And they talked about different reasons for that. And the guy that's interviewing her is giving her all these physiological reasons for why that might be, and she goes, patriarchy and rage. And just the tension that's held in so many women's bodies, and the tightness. I'm surely not just physically constipated, but you think of all the ways that can constipate someone, all that tension all the time.
A lot of stuck energy there. We're constipated, not experiencing enough orgasms, can't speak our truth. There's one of my tantra teachers said it's there's a trash heap sitting on God, and I never forgot that. phrase and that visual, like, whoa, like for all the trauma and every cultural and just everything that gets stuffed down. It's like a trash heap sitting on God. And there's this divine in us that wants to flow through us. And it can't. We got so much stuckness and stagnant stuff, but we can. The good news is we can release it.
Yeah.
And every single woman, there are tools for self-healing for every single woman that she can begin to release it before she finds a coach or a program or anything. It's just putting on something, a music. This is what I would teach anyone who's listening. If you want to dare try this, is put on some music that is evocative to your soul, meaning it makes you feel things. It makes you sad. It makes you cry. It makes you angry, because we want to actually churn it up. We want to juice this lemon because it's there, but we're so good at masking, and we're so good at putting on a pretty face and smiling through it. And we're that all that emotion is there. We need to juice it. So getting yourself in a safe place, locking the door, and just giving yourself 2 hours to just experience feeling, putting on this music, and then physically expressing it as if you are hired to be like a griever. Back in the day when their death happens, and there were people that were hired to grieve for the whole city and the families, these mourners. And you can do that. Like, if you don't feel like you can fully tap into it authentically, just experiment with opening your arms out, being on your knees, like crying out and seeing what flows through. And that, for me, just in that wailing position, all of a sudden there was like a dam that broke free. And if you want to intensify the experience, like, do it with self-pleasuring, which for me, like, I had so much shame associated. It was so much easier for me to do the laundry, clean the dishes, whatever. I would rather be productive than experience pleasure. So learning how to make time for myself, and these practices where the purpose was to feel and feel it all, and to tap into what used to be shame, and then to allow this intense feeling to flow through, and all the way to orgasm. This is healing. This is release. This is the shower. This is the baptism, like, from the inside out. And yeah, I know it can be really scary, but it's also like you're held. And I'll never forget the spiritual encounter I had after being so resistant to these practices that have been around for. They're there for us. They're in the collective wisdom, ancient wisdom of women, of how to tap into our feminine energy, our pleasure. I remember being so resistant to these practices, but meeting myself at this resistance, and holding space, and only going as fast as the slowest part of me could go. That was my rule to myself, to not force anything. And I finally had a breakthrough after, weeks of just being so resistant. And I also, this is part of the gift of becoming a sex, love, and relationship coach, is I needed to do, this was my homework. And so I couldn't just put it off. Like, if I was going to help other women, I needed to go through this experience myself. And so finally, after weeks of just feeling so much resistance and so much anger and so much frustration with this whole process, I experienced release and pleasure and grace. And then I heard out of we love you, child. And it was this tender, divine, feminine voice. And I had felt encounters with God, the Father, Jesus before, but I hadn't experienced the divine feminine, God, the mother, like that. And it caught me by such surprise that it just brought such tears to my eyes and washed me. Because here I just finished a self-pleasuring practice, which in the eyes of many Christians would have been like, that's opening the door to the devil. That's evil. That's wrong. It's bad. It's shameful. And to be met with just this surprise of love and acceptance, and just, so that really changed me. And it continues to stay with me. So it takes a lot of courage. I just wanted to share that for any woman who feels that this is an insurmountable journey, that there is such a divide between where she is and where she wants to be, and her sense of self and pleasure and fullness as a woman. I'm telling you, like, there is a way across the chasm, and it's through your body, it's through your breath, it's through love. Keep coming back.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful, Morgan. Thank you so much for sharing. And I agree with you. There is this like resistance to our natural, beautiful, whole bodies. And I also love that you brought up the Divine Mother, And that has, I mean, I've been on this deconstruction journey / like I do still feel this such connection to the divine feminine.
Mhm.
And when I do pray now, it's Mother God. That is what I needed, or in what I do need in my spiritual life, because I'm like, I've had a father, which is beautiful and amazing and needed, for 24 years. And that has served its time and its purpose. And it's not saying it's not needed,
Mhm.
but I need a divine mother in this
Yeah.
space. I need that feminine comfort and that feminine support from like source or creator or whatever you choose to call her. And that shift is so, for me, it was pivotal. And so it's with all that in mind that I ask, what does it mean for a woman to step into her wholeness? What is that shift to you?
That shift happens 1,000 times every day, because stepping into wholeness is stepping into the present moment. To be unguarded, undefended, unmasked, just to be in the present moment. That's wholeness. And I used to think of wholeness, and my journey with wholeness continues, and my understanding of wholeness continues, and it just gets deeper and deeper. And in the beginning, it was I was working on my wholeness as if I could contain it, as if I was separate from everyone else. And that is how we're taught to think about ourselves, especially in the West, where it's the individual. And we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and we really praise and prize independence and self-reliance and all that sort of thing. And I thought that wholeness was this project, and it contained inside my skin, and it was just mine. And I don't know what would happen if I became whole. Maybe I would stop feeling so much shame. It was like a freedom from something. And now how I understand wholeness, it's unfolding to like, oh, so much bigger. Like, I am not separate from the wholeness of the world, from your wholeness, from my clients, from my husband, my children. So when a woman, for me, like when I'm coming into my wholeness, stepping into my wholeness, and it's like this, you're remembering, forgetting 1,000 times a day. But when I remember, it's like, oh, I'm here and you're here. And this is the present moment, and I'm not separate from the world or the universe or God or you. And it's, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm okay and I'm safe and I'm excited. And let's co-create together. I mean, that's how I feel wholeness now. And it's an invitation to participate, which is like big, because I was so afraid to participate, even though one side of me really wanted belonging. I just felt like there was no way I could ever belong. Like I couldn't belong with the church. I couldn't belong in the world. I couldn't belong in this group and that group. I just felt like, well, I can learn how to belong to myself. And that was the first part of the journey. And it was so healing to learn how to belong to myself, to come home to myself, to belong to myself. My sexuality belongs to me. My spirituality belongs to me. And now something else is happening. It's like, I'm excited. My soul is so excited to participate. Like, I know I belong to myself. I know how to find center and find home. And now I'm just giddy to like go out there, and just the word that comes to mind is, I want to participate. And I think that's like like a little girl in me who was before she learned it wasn't cool to participate. She was like volunteering, and she was like offering to like jump in there and do the dance and, all of that. And at some point, it became scary to engage with the world, with the light, with other people, and whatever it may be. And she learned not to participate and to withdraw and to make herself her own project and to figure out what the other people needed from her and to deliver that. And it was exhausting to just live in a world where you don't really trust the world or other people. And you're always just trying to keep safe and not be rejected and avoid shame. But wholeness, and this is a journey, I see it as like a 3-phase journey of embodiment. the phase that gets really exciting is when we go from a freedom from pain and shame and fear to a freedom for, like, to actually participate, to step into the moment, to not know what's going to happen next, but to meet someone else, or to meet the world, to meet a tree, to meet God, and just say, oh my God, what are we going to create together? So yeah, if you're curious about that journey, the embodiment, I see it in 3 phases, where the first phase is we're not even aware. There's just like an unawareness. And that's kind of like the ignorance is bliss phase, where we're just like happy doing what we're told. And a lot of people are there, and that's like fine for them. And it's like, like there's a hierarchy and someone else knows what's best for you, and you just like blindly follow. And there's a lot of like ease and peace in that way of life. And then there's like nothing you did, but then someday you wake up, you're like, there's something going on. Something is off. Something's not quite right. I can't put my finger on it, but this is just not it. And then that's the initiation into the second phase of embodiment, which is like, you are aware. You become aware that things aren't what they seem to be. And you become more and more aware of the pain and the gap between the reality and the ideal, and just where you're at, and the suffering in the world. And it's a scary place. This is where a lot of people start dealing with their trauma. And it's this trauma avoidance and being very aware of the triggers, and just creating as much safety as you can, because you're so aware of how bad the world is, how wrong it is, how messed up, how patriarchy, And I would say, this is kind of where a lot of people are entering into right now. And it's an important part of the journey. It's like the teenager that begins to rebel and says, no, this is not right. But that's not where the journey ends. I think the third phase of embodiment is freedom to participate again from a place of belonging, from a place of love, from a place of, I feel secure in myself enough to open my eyes and to not know what's going to happen next, but to co-create something. And this is from the awareness point of view. Like, the first phase is like, you're not aware of anything. Like, you're just like, maybe you're in your head, like you're just like someone telling you what to do and you do it. And you just don't have your sense of self is coming from the outside all the time, external. The second phase of embodiment, you're aware. You realize you have your own sense of awareness, and you're learning how to become aware of your body and feel things finally, like the pain, the pleasure, the numbness, but you're still aware from your head. It's like you're aware of your body from this top-down experience of like, oh, well, I'm still up here in the control panel, but I'm aware of my pelvic bowl, kind of. I'm learning how to. And then the third phase of embodiment, you're aware from. You're aware from your pelvic bowl. You're aware from your body. Like, there's no division. You're not like a brain in a box anymore. Like, you're in your body. And you can be aware from that and receive information from all these different ways of knowing, head, heart, and honeypot. And that's when it's like, oh, this is where it gets really exciting. So most of my clients are in that second phase, wanting to come into that third phase.
Oh, wow. That's also good.
Yeah, they're just, the experience, like, I'm done identifying with pain. I'm done identifying with my trauma. Like, okay, great, that served a purpose. But I don't want to live. I don't want to stay stuck there. I don't want to be mad anymore. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be hyper avoidant of all these triggers. And I want to fully come home. I know there's more. It's like that intuition that hits, like, I know there's more. That's what begins the journey, and that's what continues the journey. It's like, I don't know quite what it is, but I know there's more. And a lot of times women are shamed for wanting more. Yeah. And that's one of the things I feel is so important, to give permission to want more, permission to want more. You can be absolutely grateful for your life and want more. More money, more romance, more followers on Instagram. I don't care. There's no shame. It's that's your soul. Like, I feel like the soul is here for an experience, and it's not going to settle unless you continue to deny and hear what you hear and know what you know. So it's so important to know what you know and to trust that you know some things. Even if you can't put your finger on it yet, or name it, like, there's something guiding you into the more, into the wholeness, into the fullness.
Whew. Oh my goodness. There was so much information there that was all so good. And I love too the idea of, like, I think it's so important that you come to a place where you can accept your anger and accept like, accepting that things happened and being like, that sucked. But then there's also like where do we go next? And I think I'm definitely in that phase right now for a lot of reasons. I mean, I'm sure we're in different parts of all of those steps at different points in time, depending on the situation for all sorts of things. But I'm like, I'm starting to wonder, like, what is after this? You know, it's good to like have that self-acceptance, but then where's that self-healing come and all that? So that's fantastic. I wanted to also touch on, I mean, throughout our whole conversation so far, you've brought up so many beautiful things about your faith. And I understand that you identify with Jesus and Christ, but you also kind of follow a more non-conventional faith practice that I find very beautiful. And I just wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about your faith practice and your process.
Yeah. And first, if I may, just comment on the 3 phases of embodiment, because I just kind of wanted that, and it's so much information. But each phase is beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with someone who's in the first phase. There's nothing wrong with someone who's in the second phase, and there's nothing better about someone who is experiencing or longing for the third phase. This is just what I've observed in my clients, and I've done this work enough, and looking back on my own journey, I could identify these 3 phases, and I understand enough about the phases and how we can move through it in a way that's not through force or through expectation or through a should, but through an opening and allowing that's really gentle and authentic. So I just wanted to just say that, like, be where you're at and love that. There's no rush to move to the next, to the next, to the next. Like, to be fully where you're at is almost like the shortcut to the third phase, you know? If we were thinking in Western mind hierarchy, like, what's the goal here? Where are we headed? What's the progress? And it's like full allowing of where you're at is everything. And so that, I mean, to be where you are fully in the pain and the grief and the ecstasy every day. I mean, that's, for me, that's the goal, and how I want to experience life is to honor where my soul is, and to feel what needs to be felt, and to allow it to move through. And then from that allowing, like, what opens up next, and just to observe and to notice. And that's my role as a coach and a guide and a mentor, is I do track my journey. I do reflect on it, and I do deeply connect to my clients and their stories and their journeys and the nuance of each woman, and also the patterns that unite us, and where there's so much connection there. So this is the the fruit of many, many years of work, but I would never want anyone to feel shame. We have enough pressure on us to move, to be somewhere that we're not, right? Like, there's so much pressure that we should be farther along than we are right now. And, you know, so just wipe all that clean. And
That's good. That's good
question. Yeah, thank you. It's important for for me, and to feel that too, because I'm very much still on the path. My faith, yes, it's so sweet, my faith, and I do recognize the gift I had of not growing up in a religious home. And I'm married to a man who grew up in a very religious home, and so his journey through deconstruction looked very different than mine. And so in some ways I was saved from I was saved from a lot. I still feel very, like, childlike in my faith with God. I feel because I never fully belonged in the church, even when I was really, really, really trying to, like, when in the phase, Kellyanne, when I was making the Christian yoga videos, and I was wanting to give yoga and breath and presence to people, but I feel like I had to, like, put all the religious bumper stickers on it just so people wouldn't be mad at me. It's like, make sure it's Jesus-y enough and scripture based and all that. And I was just, you know, so even when I was really, really, really trying to be seen and accepted as a Christian, my relationship with Jesus was always separate than that. And my relationship with God was always separate than that. You know, I didn't often feel safe around other people, but when I was in my body, like, that was home. And so even as a kid, my relationship with God was through my body more than a church, like a religious upbringing. I didn't have that education, but I had mystical experiences. So that still forms the basis of my faith, is this mystical connection. And I've journeyed in other faiths and really appreciate the perennial wisdom to be found, the commonalities to be found. My master's degree is in Eastern philosophy, and I spent a year studying and meditating with a guru from the East, and I credit him for showing me the way to Jesus because he taught me how to meditate. And it was in my own contemplations and meditations that I had my encounters with God, with Jesus, that became my own. So, as I was growing and changing and trying everything and wanting to be everything, Buddhist, like Baha'i, Hindu, and then finally I had a teacher, an Eastern teacher, say, you just go to the religion of your youth. And even though I didn't have a religion in my youth, I was still, I'm from the Western world. My grandma went to church. There was religious icons in her home. Like, that was the closest thing to being mine, and the most authentic thing. So I'm at a place now, and this is pretty, just, I would say recent, where I feel like I get to be a Christian. I get to call myself a Christian. And there was a time for a few years where I just didn't want to fight. I didn't want to be put in that category. I didn't want to be lumped in with the evangelicals, and I didn't want to be lumped in with the deconstruction. Like, I just didn't want to be a part of any of it. And having that label was too exhausting because it meant I had to defend something or explain myself or give context, and I just didn't care. I just wanted to be with God, and that's for me. And so, but now I am at a place where it's changing. Like I said, there's a desire to participate and a desire to, like, really show up in the world and participate. And I think part of that is the reclamation. Like, I get to call myself whatever I want to call myself, and so do you, and so does everyone. And I think there's such a beautiful, rich tradition in Christianity. And for me, very much, like, I don't know, like, people may be like, there's no way in hell she's a Christian. I don't know what people think. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's in me, and I feel a reverence, and I feel it's a relationship that's always growing and changing. And there are seasons when I wasn't orienting towards that relationship. I wasn't engaging in that relationship, but there is a relationship that abides, that I feel. And my relationship with Jesus is that there's no pressure. Like, there's like an understanding with him, and when I orient towards him, he's there. But there's never I don't get this feeling like he's in the corner being like, I'm here. Like, when you gonna turn back towards me? It's like, I just feel like so much encouragement, like my relationship with Mary and Mary Magdalene and the Holy Spirit and Sophia. Like, I just feel absolute permission. And I don't know, like, this is, like, prayers are important to me. Some scriptures are so important to me. And I'm grateful to have those words as threads to pull back, to use the mind. This is one of the ways we can use the faculty of the mind to help us come back into wholeness, is through memorization and presence and prayers, and just be able to, these words that are edifying, these blessings, because so often we don't realize it, but our mind is going nuts with criticism, critique, comparison, just bad thoughts. And so Philippians 4:8, it's like, whatever is beautiful, whatever is true, whatever is good, like, think about these things. I think about that a lot. Like, this is how I want to orient my inner world, how I want to teach my kids to orient their inner world. Not because I want them to be good Christians, but because I know what the difference is when our mind is filled with things that are good and beautiful and true, and then what it's like to be filled with fear and shame, self-doubt, and not feeling like we belong, and all those other things.
I really liked what you were saying about, I believe you said the guru you were studying meditation with, I believe. Sorry if I'm misremembering what you called him, but of go to the religion of your youth. Go to what feels like home to you. Go to what feels familiar to you.
Yeah.
Because I have found myself in that space of like, oh, I want to explore all these different things and understand and learn, which is beautiful. Like that's a good thing to learn and understand. But moving into that embodiment space of like, actually, I can be in a faith practice and continue to learn and grow. And I don't necessarily need to understand the ins and outs of every faith practice to be able to express myself in the way that needs to be expressed, because that soulfulness doesn't leave. It's like they're waiting, and I'm like, oh, but I need to discover. And it's like that permission to be like, you can discover if it's delightful for you, and that's good, but don't feel that pressure and that shame. But also don't feel the pressure to give a label as well, which for me is the permission I'm trying to give myself right now. Because that's something we get asked about a lot is, well, what is your faith identity? What do you identify as? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm spiritually curious is my label I give myself. And so I like that like space for permission of like, you know, like Christianity can be hard in a lot of ways, or maybe there's a lot of harm you're undoing, but that doesn't mean it's not valid and good and beautiful and can serve its space.
Yeah.
I like you talking about kind of like being like, I don't want to identify here or there. I don't want to be like lumped in.
Yeah.
Which I think is something I've been reflecting on a lot lately, which is when I fully identified in the Christian faith, there was a lot of gatekeeping involved in terms of like defining what Christianity really is and who gets to be a Christian and who doesn't and what's required and what isn't. And like there's just a lot of rules and requirements and like rights of entry kind of incorporated into like my thinking. And I've noticed even kind of having stepped away from that faith, that sort of pattern of wanting this right and wrong and like these clearly defined lines to still exist. And I've just been continually reminding myself, I think this podcast is a great opportunity for me to do that, because I meet all sorts of people with all sorts of different expressions of faith. And we've just talked about and explored all sorts of different expressions of faith that are so much more fluid and so much more personal than like kind of a corporate definition of like where someone belongs, which I think is so freeing in the sense that suddenly you're not having to defend yourself or to defend others or make excuses or like point fingers. Suddenly you can express spirituality in the way that feels most true to you. And all those other things, I mean, like, maybe they just don't really matter all that much.
They matter to the head, right? They matter to the value system of the part of our consciousness that feels safe when it can name something, when it can define something, when it can understand. So those are values of the head, but they're not our wholeness. It's one, it's
one piece.
I hear what you're saying, and there is, something really beautiful opens up when you can let that go. No more gatekeepers keeping you in or the job that you need to do, but there is this invitation to experience what is flowing through in this present moment. Like what is real based on the felt sense of this moment. And I think it's really hard to do, and it was impossible without the embodiment work, or because we live in a culture that is orients from the head up and shames, demonizes, it numbs the body and the feminine pole of consciousness. So to understand, to be able to meet someone in the moment and to be fully open to receiving from them, you can't do that from the head. And so you see why there's so much conflict in the world and why there's so much gatekeeping and cancel culture, and this is how it is. This is what it means to be a good human. I mean, this is what it means to be a bad human. There's so much that just doesn't create. It doesn't create what it's trying to create.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, so
it makes me think of this idea of like going back to the faith of your youth. it makes me think of this this piece of video journalism that I saw where a journalist was talking about how the United States can never truly go into the metric system. They were talking about systems of measurement, and they were saying how they've tried to teach themselves the metric system for years and years and years, but really they're always just converting what is it that it's called in the US? The standard measure system. They're just converting that to metric. They're not truly thinking in metric. And I think similarly, like when you're raised in a Christian environment, like the United States largely is, or if you're raised in a Hindu environment in India, or if you're raised in a Buddhist environment or a Muslim environment, your default is gonna pretty much still be that set of thinking that you've been raised in. And so this idea that your default is something that it's not necessarily good or bad, but that's what's been ingrained into you and is so much a part of who you are and the way that you've become a person. And so going back to the faith of your youth is not bad or reverting necessarily, or it's not like, folding in the sense of going back to this thing that you've moved away from, but it's like, no, this is part of who I am because of where I'm from and the environment that I've been steeped in. And there's good in all of those.
I mean, the mystics will tell you, like, it doesn't really matter which road you take. There are many roads to Rome. And so the idea of going back to the religion of your youth, the faith of your youth, is honoring the fact that so much groundwork, the tracks get laid from age 0 to 7. Like so much of our deepest layer of being is informed by those first 7 years. And to try to reinvent the wheel at 30 and to try to it's just like, that is not what it means to be human. You don't need to be someone different. It's about integrating. Wholeness is a lot of wholeness work is helping people integrate, because there's these fragments, right? Like there's these good experiences and then really confusing experiences in religion and family and sex and whatever. So to live fragmented is to feel like it's like you have to choose something else, because we don't know how to make sense of all these different fragments. But wholeness work is integration work where, like there's an acceptance of there are certain things that just are the way they are, and they're not going to change no matter how much you want them to. Part of that being maybe what's been seated in your unconscious of who God is. And to not fight that, but to let that be a vehicle, because it's just the finger pointing at the moon in all cases. It doesn't really matter what name we give this experience. It's the experience that we want more and more of, and to be able to live from that place of love and wholeness and presence. And so I think we spend a lot of time trying to, figure out what the finger is instead of the moon, that just being with the moon.
Yeah. So going off of returning to faith, or, all the things that come with, especially Christian faith here in a Western culture, there's so much trauma that can come with that we've touched on a little bit. There's so much harm that can come from something like purity culture, from the patriarchy that is ingrained in a lot of American evangelicalism, and all these woes that we know and that make us hesitant to say, like, I'm a Christian, right? I'm curious to hear from you how you navigate clients that have that kind of trauma, and how you move forward.
Most of my clients, I've been doing this work for a long time. And so I would say the journey that I've been on with this work is, early in my work, there was a lot of women coming from purity culture with their goal being sexual freedom and pleasure and connection, intimacy. But now I'm working with mostly women who have been on that journey, and they are leaders of some form. And the question is around self-leadership and how to show up consistently from this place of wholeness and presence, and how to reconcile these fragmented pieces of their life that may involve sex and religion, but it's moving towards how do we contribute in a bigger way? Like, how do we actually lead ourselves well and lead from love?
What are some of maybe some of the keys, although that truly is something that can't just be resolved with a few a few statements of encouragement or something like that. But what are some of the key things that maybe you would think a woman in those situations would need?
Yeah. I think whether a woman is coming out of purity culture and experienced shame in religion, or she's just a woman trying to come into her fullness of expression, it's the same return to the feminine. Because in religion, evangelical Christianity, lots of religion in general, lots of cultures in general, and patriarchy, it's a dismissal, dishonoring of the feminine. The feminine being a valid experience. The feminine in all of us. The men have equally been hurt by the patriarchy. There's so much pain men feel and they can't even express or name it. And it's hurt everybody. It's hurt it because we have the feminine and the masculine energy in us. And so the feminine pole of our consciousness being systematically dismissed, demeaned, dishonored, discouraged. Like that's what we're here to overcome. Like the work begins with, how do we self-validate? How do we orient back to the feminine? How do we feel safe again and own this feminine energy? What is feminine energy? What does it mean to reclaim this feminine power? Like this is the work. So it doesn't really matter if a woman comes to me specifically wanting to work through purity culture, shame, and deconstruction, or if she's like a CEO and she's like, I am so tired of orienting around men and carrying all this emotional labor and the boundary. It's like, okay, so this is where the work begins. And it's actually, what I love about my work is trauma is not an issue. Like when we do embodiment work and we do it in this particular way where it is this gentleness and this sensitivity to the present moment, like we get to heal, and the healing is really gentle and there's so much delight and playfulness in it. And what I find is that giving women the tools to orient herself, to guide herself back to the safety in her body. And there's many tools we have to do that. She practices that. She practices it. She practices that. Becomes her new default. In the world, I mean, some of the things that she thinks are the problems are no longer problems. And that's something I see consistently in a lot of different modalities. We're focusing on a problem that really isn't the problem. And as soon as we just learn how to orient ourselves, come home to our body's wisdom, feel safe in our feminine energy and power, the problems disappear. They dissolve. They're not problems anymore. We're showing up differently. And when our energy shifts, the relationship dynamics shift. And I love this Eleanor Roosevelt quote. I reference it all the time. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. When I finally understood that, I no longer felt shame or less than talking to a pastor or talking to a man who is important, Sure. I never felt like my words got stuck in my throat anymore. And there is just this unconscious experience we have as women where we are less than. Our experience is less than. Our experience isn't to be taken serious. Like our intuition, our felt sense, like our gut, our opinions, like don't really matter, or don't weigh as much, or aren't as valid as of a male. So our first step is self-validation and security, finding our own sense of security, that we are no longer searching for the outside to feel safe, to feel valid, to feel secure. And that energy of being able to shift from needy energy, like I'm looking to you to approve of me, a man, someone of more authority or more prestige or more followers, or I know how to approve of myself, how to nurture myself from within, how to give myself that inner security, then the dynamic changes. You don't need to communicate that. It's just the energy shifts. So I like to bypass a lot of the things just by going into the embodiment work and the energy work, because the stories don't really matter. I mean, their stories can be beautiful, and it's important that you have a space to hear them. But at the end of the day, if what you want, and this is how I shapeshift a lot in my coaching, mentoring with women one-on-one. I can be a spiritual director. I can be a big sister. I can be a coach. When I step into the role of coach, that is a woman asking me to help her shift a state change. So she's experiencing a certain way of being in the world that's no longer working for her. She's told the story enough. Like she's, it's boring to her. Every time she gets together with her girlfriends, it's the same story. It's money, it's sex, it's whatever. It's the same story, right? And she's tired of it. And so she doesn't need to tell the story anymore. What she needs is an embodiment shift. And then I coach her on how to make that shift. And before she's ready, because this is like another honoring the place that you're at. If you've never told your story before and you've never felt safe enough or in a circle of women to share your story, then it's so important to share your story and to be heard. And so it's honoring that there's many different ways to heal, and one is not better or worse. It's what I believe is, and I see my clients as, and I tell them, you are sovereign. You can tell me what you need. Do you need to be heard? Do you need to be mirrored? Do you want a state change? Do you want to shift? Like, do you are ready for that? So letting women know that they can be trusted with what they desire.
Wow.
And it's so important because I don't want to assume anything about my clients. I'm not going to assume I know what's best for your soul. Like, I'm very curious and I want to meet you into place, and I will use all the tools I have to help create a clearing space so you get an encounter with your soul and your own wisdom can come through. And then I am by your side as a guide, as a facilitator from what your soul wants and needs. But I don't assume that or lay that on you.
That's phenomenal. You can be trusted with what your soul desires, which I think every woman longs to hear that. But I'll speak for myself with my experience growing up in Christianity, which obviously working through this, reclaiming a lot of things. But I was told because I was a woman, I could not be trusted and I should not trust myself. You're the stumbling block. You're the problem. You're the sin embodied. And I'm like, like that process of learning, like I can trust myself. I am my own advocate. I am my own holy space is such a radical shift. And to hear something like you can be trusted with your own desire, like your desire isn't evil. Your desire is a piece of who you are and part of your divine embodiment. Like that is so good.
I feel like I'm being ministered to right now. I'm like just trying to my brain is trying to understand this information. It's just like, wow. That's a new way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Obviously, for all of our listeners, they need to go find you, listen to all of your podcasts, do some holy yoga with you. What are some of those low barrier to entry practices that they can try out to test the waters in terms of stepping into their own embodiment?
Yeah.
You might be surprised what I suggest, because so far this conversation has been pretty deep and I love the depth, but there's a lot of playfulness and delight to the work that I do too. And so the entry point that I recommend actually is through a sexy selfie practice.
Oh,
yay. I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Soul. Yes.
So good.
because a few reasons why. We get so stuck in our identities as women, and we don't realize how just in this one rigid idea of what it means to be who we are missing out on our fullness and our wholeness. And we live in such a visual culture, and the way that we receive information through our eyes is either going to heal us or contribute to our sense of shame and disconnection and not belonging. So I say we use the tool that can definitely harm our sense of self and worthiness, and we learn how to use it to heal. And that's what I teach women how to do. So take the sexy selfie, and it becomes a tool for self-healing. Learning how to see ourselves clearly, see our wholeness, to embody our wholeness first by catching a glimpse of it. And this comes directly from my journey, my story, which we didn't get a chance to get into, and I'll just share briefly. But when I became a single mom, it was devastating. It was such a loss of identity. I was so confused, and I was so stuck in my head. I couldn't figure out how I was going to make it work. I was really, really trapped and not in a good place. So much anxiety about the future because I couldn't orient myself anymore. I mean, I based my sense of self and self-worth on this one particular identity, and now that was gone. So who was I? How was I going to manage through the world? And I really felt disqualified from a life of love, a life of romance, a life of adventure, which is what my soul really longed for. So I felt like, what's the point of living? I don't want to live. I don't want to bring another human being into this world who experiences the same level of confusion and disappointment and despair. So long story short, I ended up in a mental hospital to care for suicidal ideation and suicide attempt. And it was in that journey that's when I decided, okay, now it's time to learn how to take care of myself. And the first thing I did after I got out of the hospital was I picked up the camera again. Before I became pregnant, I was in school for photography, and I loved self-portraits. I loved taking photos of women. I loved making my friends feel like they were, in an Annie Leibovitz photo shoot on the cover of Vanity Fair. That's just what I love to do. So, but I didn't feel worthy of being in front of the camera, especially because I didn't recognize myself. I didn't know who I was. And I felt so ugly and so much shame and unlovable and rejected and just like trash. So I decided I'm going to pick up the camera. And the way that I found my way into it was to play with an archetype, which I adored. This, in my mind, this divine feminine archetype. And it was this character, Marilyn Monroe. And I just imagined, okay, what if Marilyn Monroe was pregnant and single? How would she see herself? How would she show up in the world? So I put on this Marilyn Monroe wig, and I took out this gallon of chocolate ice cream, and I put on this moo dress and set up my camera, and I started this photo shoot. And what I experienced, not just with so much joy, the embodiment of Marilyn Monroe is pregnant, like getting to let go of my identity and who I thought I was, and how trapped I felt in that, and just become someone else in that moment. And in the becoming of someone else, I actually found my way back to my truer self, which was a woman who was creative, a woman who was playful and funny and beautiful and sexy. And so sometimes we have to leave our identities, put on some costumes, and that actually is our doorway back in. And when I teach women how to play with archetypes and work with archetypes, that's the goal, is to get them outside of this tiny box that their identity lives in, and to get them to be able to experience their wholeness through the back door, through trying on either the identity of the seductress or the queen or the maiden or the sacred fool or the priestess, the dark feminine, like all these different ways that actually give us access to our wholeness. But in that selfie practice, I saw a woman who was lovable, who was worthy of love, who was funny, who was glamorous, who was imperfect but endearing. And being able to see myself with those eyes, that was like a launch pad for me to begin, that I felt worthy of a journey. I felt worthy of uncovering all that lay beneath, my identity, my sense of self, and my self-image. But this is a doorway in, because we do put so much weight on our appearance and how people see us and what they perceive and what we project. So I use that as a playful way to help women into the embodiment journey. That, if nothing else, you're going to learn how to take an awesome, stunning photo of yourself where you finally feel like you recognize who you are. I mean, that's like the perk, but there's actually deeper stuff at play where you're learning how to heal your own gaze, see yourself for who you are, see your wholeness, instead of just seeing yourself from the outside in through the male gaze or through the lens of your religion or your family or culture. We don't realize how much of our power we've given away by the way that we perceive ourselves, and it's generally through someone else's lens. So the sexy selfie, sexy soul practice is how I loved giving women that first taste of, wow, this is actually super fun to take the power back and to reclaim who I am as a woman.
I'm so glad you said that. Do you remember a few years ago when you posted with the face jewels?
Yes.
I promptly went to Amazon and was like, I need face jewels.
I
now.
remember when you did this. Yeah.
Emma was like, why did you buy these? I'm like, it's really important. Like Morgan like is doing this and I have to do this and it's important. Anyway,
It's so fun.
and it's just like that fun element of like,
Yes.
I can be childlike and delightful in my own sensuality and that be holy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
Well, Morgan, I feel like I could talk to you for 82 hours. But we're kind of starting to wrap up here. And I just so appreciate all the wisdom and vulnerability you brought today and shared with us. It is so, so valuable. And I so appreciate it and feel so honored. But this is our question that we love to ask every guest. And it is open to your own interpretation. But what does woman being mean to you?
So the first line of the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. It's not the eternal Tao. So my first inclination is, the woman being defined is not the woman being. Like to experience, like there is a wordless presence to a woman being.
I love that. The idea that there's this practice that I've done that's like a meditative practice where you say like, God is good, for example. And then you say God is not good. I think it's apophatic meditation. And then you say God is not good, because there's no word that can truly describe this goodness that God is. And that reminds me of that idea that the Tao, or that the woman being has no name, has no way of being defined, because words can't encapsulate it. Words can't do it justice, and we can attempt to, and attempts might be a shadow of it, but they're still going to fall short. And so that's I think it's a really powerful image and really, really just stunning.
Right? And it's so cool. I mean, I love the question because any way that it gets answered, and we can answer it in so many different ways, but it's right. And it's because it's what's coming through in that moment. And this is, for me, my goal and presence in the Embody Academy, which is my mentorship program, the tagline is, it's a new tagline, and it's become a woman of presence. And I love this, for me, it feels like something like becoming a woman of presence is like coming home to the body, coming home to possibility, coming home to connection and belonging. And we're always changing. We're always changing. Allow us to change. And that's part of the feminine brilliance, is that, and that's the aspect of life that is always flowing. And like Heraclitus says, you never step into the same river twice. It's like moment to moment, that answer can change. And every single answer is beautiful. So wherever you're at in your life right now, you are a woman being.
Yeah.
You're the perfection of it. And it can be totally different tomorrow.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun thing about the question for me too. Is kind of the yes and amen with like and all sorts of answers that we've gotten over the years. And it's expanded my perspective, and it feels like I'm looking at womanhood differently every time we do an episode like this. So I really love that.
It's beautiful. It's like that reflection. That like goodness in you reflecting back to me, and my goodness in myself reflecting to you. And that like that exchange of like, we are woman being together. Like we actually can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
And
we're connected.
Yeah, we're so connected. And like which is why I feel like competition amongst women is so silly. Because I'm like, her success is reflecting back the success I can have. And like the success that I can have is reflecting back opportunity and potential to other women. And I think that's so connected to the beauty of the divine feminine that connects all of us.
So well said.
And then perhaps one of my final but favorite questions is, what resources would you recommend? Because you are so well read and always have such great recommendations. And it can be anything. It could be a documentary series or a book or articles. We've had people refer like philosophers, like you name it.
I would say anything by Marianne Woodman.
Hmm.
She has a book called Coming Home to Yourself. And it's just filled with little gems of her wisdom. She was a Jungian psychoanalyst and so adept in the field of feminine depth psychology. So I always learned so much from her words. So anything by Marianne Woodman. And then in the work of wholeness, I am in love with the work of Philip Shepherd, who wrote New Self, New World, Radical Wholeness. These are books that have really informed my ever-evolving relationship with wholeness and what it means to embody wholeness. And then if there's anything else, I would say just spend as much time in nature as possible. Spend as much time outside, nature, listening to music, delighting in your senses. Like, you are your best resource. Like, the way that you experience the world is your best teacher. So to see that, like, how are you feeding? How are you experiencing your five senses every single day? Like, delighting that, choosing to and intentionally making time for delight in all of your senses is the doorway. I think delight is the doorway, and the senses, that's the best information you can ever get. And if there's anything else, I personally use so much like tender touch, like practices of just tender touch, just to remind the body that she is safe, she is loved, she's lovable. And praying naked, dancing naked, just all the things that combine these things that used to be completely separated. Like, here's your sexuality over here, here's your spirituality over here. I say, like, bring it together as much as you can, just to train your nervous system and your experience. Like, this is normal, that they can coexist. Like, I can be in my body, like, fully sensual. Like, I love turning on like rap, like Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion, and like being in like worship, like lighting candles and just like being in my body and my sexuality and my like that juicy feminine pussy power energy, and also feeling the depth of my sacredness and connection to God. So that's what I recommend.
Stunning. I love it. I love that you brought up Cardi B. Thank you. And so then finally, though, where can the people find you, Morgan? Plug away everything you have. And everyone listening, please go follow Morgan everywhere you possibly can. It's so important.
Thank you so much. Okay, Instagram, Morgan Day Cecil on Instagram, and YouTube, Morgan Day Cecil on YouTube. My website, morgandaycecil.com, and I actually have a masterclass coming up. It's called Liberate Your Selfie. So depending on when this podcast airs, definitely either catch that live with me or watch the replay, because it's going to be filled with 2-part training filled with seeing your wholeness and embodying your wholeness and the tools to do that.
Morgan, wow. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for your time. It has been such a delightful, soulful conversation. Thank you for the reminder of the delight and the enjoyment and the playfulness, because that is equally valid. And thank you, women beings, for every single one of you that have been here and listened and joined the conversation with us today. We value you and thank you for being here and bringing your wholeness and your energy into the world. It's so, so important. And we wouldn't be who we are, the Woman Being Podcast, without you. So make sure you're following us on Instagram. Give us a review. Make sure that you're connecting with us on TikTok, because we post fun things all the time there too. We do lives too, like once a week, maybe twice a week if you're lucky. And so, we'd love to connect with you anywhere and everywhere. And with that, we're just gonna say we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.
Thank you.